Um, I'm here today, Lorri Lown, Coach Lorri Lown with Team Wilpers, and I'm here today with Eric Duncan, who is one of our Team Wilpers athletes. And this is our week 5 athlete briefing, so should be a good one. Everybody coming off a little bit of recovery week, so a cutback week, and should feel pretty fresh going into next week, which is awesome. But Eric, where are you located?
Yeah, so I'm in Southwest Washington. We live just north of Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, Washington, or Portland,
Oh,
Oregon. We're in La Center, so it's a little tiny town, so like 3,000 people. So
that's awesome.
beautiful area.
I've gone across that bridge, so you
Yep.
can ride your bike. And I remember there's a really steep, spirally drive out of it that goes to a really hard grade. But what's the
Yeah.
name of that bridge?
Well, so there's two. So there's the I-5 bridge and the 205 bridge. So I'm not sure which one you went
Oh,
over.
well, it was called
I
like
haven't.
the Hope Bridge or something like that, the bike bridge.
Yeah.
And it crosses from, we had to cross because it was like, oh, I can get another bonus state here. I can just cross into Washington while we were in
Yep.
Oregon. But
Yeah,
yeah, the
for
other
sure.
really cool thing I remember on that ride is we rode along some trails and then there were some stairs going down to the main road out of a forest land. And the stairs had a groove to take your bike down with you. So you
Oh,
would
nice.
set the bike in this little groove and then you could walk down the stairs and not have to carry your bike. So there's my
Yeah.
Southwest
Portland.
Washington memory.
Yeah, Portland and Vancouver are both big bike cities. So,
Oh, yeah. And there's some events, right?
yeah.
RSVP
Mhm.
and STP.
100-mile ride.
Wow.
People do it in 1 day or two. So,
Have you done it?
yeah, I have. I did it in 2 days. I think I've done it twice. So it's a lot of fun. Really big ride.
That's awesome.
So hundreds of people.
I know. I have lots of friends who've done it, and I haven't. It had historically been the same weekend as, triple bypass, but also the death ride, which I had always done the death ride. And so it was like, oh, someday it'll be on my list. And I've gotten a little bit of pressure from some Team Wilpers folks actually to do it. So I may come up and do one of those at some point.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun to put a bunch of people together and do
I
that.
know, wouldn't it? Although take a bunch of Peloton
Yeah.
people and put them in a pace line, that should be an interesting experience, right? I know.
Might want to do a couple shakeout rides.
Exactly. I've ridden the AIDS ride, the California AIDS ride a bunch of times. And one year there was a team of Johnny G spinning instructors. And they weren't just instructors, they were like the master instructors who taught everyone and super fit. They were amazing to watch from a fitness point of view, but they were falling all over themselves because they rode only stationary bikes. That's how they trained. And as we know, right, Linda, as we get outside and we have all of these distractions as well, but now I have to think about shifting and braking and flipping in and out and not tipping over in front of the coffee shop. So yeah, awesome.
I think we all have a story.
Right? My first time I didn't even clip in. No one told me you could change the tension on the pedals. And it was back in the day, almost everybody was riding SPD mountain bike pedals at that point. And I got my first shoes. And I remember where I bought them, and they were red and yellow. They were Answer accelerators. And my friend Darcy sold them to me. I ran into them 20 years later, working at a bike shop still. But I went out on this ride, and it was like 30 miles, and it was me and my then boyfriend and the ride leader. So it was just 3 of us. And I never clipped my second foot in because I couldn't get it in. And so I rode the whole day with a foot sitting on top of a pedal, which is incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. And at the end of the ride leader volunteered to release my tension so I could clip it out. We didn't think about teaching people back in the day.
Yep.
You will learn the hard way. So how long have you been riding? Tell us your story.
Oh, yeah. No, I've been riding as long as I can remember. Probably 20 plus years. And it's funny you mentioned spinning. Spinning was actually how I got into riding.
Mm-hmm.
Way back in the day on Worldwide of Sports. I was recovering from some surgery, watching Ironman Hawaii, and I thought, man, wouldn't it be fun to do that?
Yeah.
And so I went down to the gym and got started doing spinning classes, and I thought, okay, if I could one at a time, right? Because I had swam in high school. And so I thought, okay, I know I could swim. I've always loved to be around water and do all that kind of stuff. So forget about that. I'll figure out if I could bike 100 miles by itself and if I could figure out how to run, and I'm a horrible runner. So we'll do that next, right? So I set out to bike a century, and I figured if I could bike a century, then I'll attack the marathon. And so that's kind of what I did with the goal of doing an Ironman. And by the time I got kind of the century under my belt, and then I did the Portland Marathon. So we talked about Portland. At the time, we were living in the central Willamette Valley, so down by Salem. So I did the Portland Marathon, and I got those behind my belt. And then I found out that getting into Ironman Hawaii is a lot harder than I thought. So I kind of set Ironman by the wayside and moved over to just more biking. I also realized that qualifying, my run times are horrible. I say run. Run is generous.
Yeah.
So
You can train
I
them.
kind of, yeah, participant is probably better. So, but yeah, I've been biking for a really long time. And Salem, when we lived down there, and we lived in Salem for a long, long time, and there was a really, really good bike shop there. And they did rides out of that shop Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. That Tuesday evenings, Thursday evenings, and then on Saturday they did a really long ride. So we rode a ton. And I just rode thousands and thousands of miles with them. So it was awesome. And there was a gym in town that did spinning classes. And so rode a long time. And then the place that I worked shut down, and we had to move up here to Southwest Washington. And even though Vancouver has a pretty active bike culture, it never really fit my schedule. And more cars got on the road, and it got to be less, I guess, conducive to riding. And so I kind of got out of it for quite a while. And then kind of got back into it as I got older. I said, if I'm ever going to do that Ironman, now I need to do it. Yeah. And so what happened really was, I hate to keep talking about COVID because it'd be nice to put that in the past. But when that happened, my wife, her job went 100% remote, and our little house was way too small. So we moved to a bigger house. This is really weird because there's just the two of us. We moved into a bigger house so that she had an office. And as part of that, we got a home gym because I couldn't go to the gym anymore. And we got a Peloton. I was going to get a trainer because I said, hey, I would love to bike again. And she said, well, let's get a Peloton because we can both use it and it'll have classes and all these other things. And so we did that. And I started riding again and got my half Ironman in. So
nice.
Yeah.
In person or a virtual half Ironman?
Well, no, I actually did the Salem half Ironman, and 90% of my training was on, we bought a Nordic Track treadmill, but 90% of my training was Peloton classes inside.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was, I did it last summer, so it was, way later, but it was, Southwest Washington or, anything west of the Cascades in the Pacific Northwest, as the weather is horrible.
Yeah.
So being outside to train is awful. I mean, you can do it. Lots of people do. And I did for years, but
meaning in the heat or in the winter?
Yeah, in the winter. Summertime is great. We have, anytime after the 4th of July into about October, we have beautiful weather. It's awesome. You love being here, but from about mid-October on, it's not good.
Yeah.
So
I grew up in upstate New York, and it's similar. It's like October through April, you probably have pretty bad weather. And yeah. And I remember in high school, I decided to run a season of track. I was not an athlete. I was a musician. And somehow I thought I needed a sport on my college applications. And it took me about a month to be able to run a mile without stopping. And I practiced at home. I mean, I would go, and my dad had measured out in the car what the blocks were. And I remember running in the freezing cold in the snow. I don't know why I was so dedicated to it, because I was not tough. I was not an athlete. I was definitely just doing it to do it. And that weather is not conducive. But as we see on social media, lots of people do run in the cold weather and ride. I have a client in New York and she rides outside. I'm like, that's crazy. But yeah.
It all comes down to gear, and there's been a lot of talk in the Facebook group. I mean, having good gear makes all the difference.
Mhm.
You can ride in wet, you can ride in cold, and all that stuff. It makes it really hard to get motivated.
Yeah, it does. And when it's dark and when it's cold, and sometimes in my house, I feel like it's cold in here. And then I go outside and I'm like, oh, it was 80 today. How did I not know that? But yeah, the
Yeah,
best invention ever, I think, was thermal bibs. I never hit thermals, and I don't even remember the first time I got some thermal because your butt would get cold. Even though you're
yeah,
resting in just plain Lycra, your butt's cold. And you would come in
yep.
and get in the shower and it like everything burns. So yeah, I
hmm
just re-upped my wardrobe of fleece and thermals so I could ride outside, and it's cold here in the mornings. It's 40s. So yeah. Now, okay. So I was thinking about the whole Ironman thing, and I think you and I probably were on the couch at the same time because I remember watching the Ironman World Championship. And when I became a cyclist, I thought that was bike racing. I
hmm
thought triathlon was racing, and
Yep.
I did one, but I did not choose a half Ironman distance. For those who are new to triathlon, there are lots of distances, like a sprint.
Yeah.
It's
hmm
cute. It's short. You run or
hmm
you swim. What? I don't even know what the swim is. It should take most people
Five,
9 minutes. I think it took me 20.
yeah,
Um,
500 meters or yards typically. Yeah, and typically done in a pool, usually around a
ah,
high school or a college. Yep.
okay. I did mine
Yep.
in a lake. That was terrifying.
Okay.
In a
Yep.
wetsuit, which was also
Ooh.
terrifying. Yeah. And then I'm trying to remember the bike, I think was 20K, maybe,
Yep.
which is what, 12 miles, not long,
hmm
although it was mountain bike. And then the run was supposed to be a 5K and it turned out to be 4.5 miles, which I hadn't trained for it because I was always injured for running. And yeah, I was done. I was like, I'm an expert at this. I won my age group and I'm done. I will never do this again, but never say never.
One and out. Yep.
I know. It's very tempting living here at the beach because there's a bunch of triathlons here, sprints and Olympic distance and half iron and Ironman as well. So, yeah.
hmm
So you have to start big.
Yeah.
People do that though. And I've noticed like in the running world, people are like, oh, I'm going to run a marathon. And I'm like, dude, start with a 5K or a 10K.
Yeah.
That's plenty
Yep.
hard. You go really fast when you run that short a distance. So,
Well, and
yeah,
those are everywhere. I
they
mean,
are.
and yeah, you could probably almost do one almost on any weekend from
Yeah.
spring through fall.
Yeah. And you get a medal and a t-shirt,
hmm
usually.
Right?
And a snack at the end. So it's a good thing. Um, now you have a busy life. We were talking about
I do.
this. You are what I
Yeah.
would call a time crunched cyclist. There are books about
Yep.
this,
Yep.
which means you don't have 20 hours a week to train. How many hours do you train every week?
Somewhere between 5 and 8, and then when the weather gets nicer, I get a little more, right? So typically, I'm training in the early mornings because it gets dark so early.
Hmm.
And then when the weather gets nicer, then I can fit something in the afternoons. But yeah, in the wintertime, 5 to 8.
Yeah.
That's about
And
what I can
that's,
get.
that is probably about the minimum to race. And you've been racing. So what kind of racing are you doing?
Yeah, so last year I started out doing gravel races, and then as I went into the fall, I did some cyclocross, and then this year I'm going to try and do a little bit of short track and some cross country mountain bike.
Short track mountain bike. I like short track. We don't have any here.
Oh,
We had
really?
one. We had a mountain bike stage race years ago near Sacramento that had short track, and it's my only short track experience, and I loved it because it's like
Yeah.
a criterium, right? It's short, it's
hmm
hard, you do multiple laps, and some of it's technical, but not super technical. It's like, yeah, go hard. So let's unpack that for a minute. So gravel racing tends to be longer events. You might be racing
hmm
for 4 to 10 hours. That's a long time.
Yep.
Um, and then cyclocross, which is completely different. For those of you who don't know what cyclocross is, it's kind of like steeplechase in running, where you have a short course, often in an urban area like a park. So it's super spectator friendly, very family friendly. There are different categories for different experience levels and genders, and there's races for kids and old dudes, um, and races are typically, well, beginner level, 30 minutes. maybe for the more advanced racers, you're looking at 45 to 60 minutes. How do you put those two together?
Yeah, well, they're very different. And the gravel races were in the early spring
Mhm.
and early summer. And so that was good training for me for the half Ironman. And then the cyclocross really got started only because some people that I work with were doing them. And
Oh, you had some
also,
fun.
and that's exactly what it was. And we had some really nice weather, right?
Yeah.
And there's a super active culture of that here. So it happens, a lot of the races happen at PIR, which is Portland International Raceway.
Hmm.
It's just about 20 minutes for us, and these races are huge. There's probably 200 or 300 people there. They happen on a week night, and it happens under the lights, and so it was a lot of fun. And like you said, there's a lot of age groups, so it gets parsed into not just ages but skill levels. So you're kind of
Hmm.
racing against similar people. So it was a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
even though my fitness is really, I mean, I guess I characterize myself as a diesel. It takes a long time to get going. Like I really identify what Christian talks about, getting the oil off the bottom of the pan. That's me. It takes me 15 or 20 minutes to warm up. That's no joke. If we're going to do like VO2 max workout, I have to do a 15-minute warm up ahead of time.
Oh, yeah. I
Um,
am the same way. And for cyclocross, when we talk about race warm-ups, we warm up before races, just like we do before an FTP
yep.
test. And the shorter the race, the longer the workout or the warm-up. So if
Yeah.
I have a road race or a gravel race, might not do much of anything. Might do 15, 20 minutes, but it's very intentional 15, 20 minutes. There's some hard efforts to kind of blow off the steam and get everything moving. And yeah. So for a cyclocross race, you might do an hour warm up before a 30-minute race just to get everything ready to go. Because when you go, it is the hardest thing I've ever done. There is no letting off the gas. There's no recovery because you're running and riding. So these courses are designed so you're riding on any kind of terrain. It might be pavement, it might be grass, it might be sand. We had one race right on the San Francisco Bay where you had to run through the sand because you couldn't drop. It was a big drop onto the beach, and if you did, you were going to just like eat it. So you had to dismount, run. There, you might have a barricade at the bottom of a run up a hill, so you can't ride it. They make you get off the bike, and yeah, it's so hard. It is so hard, and when you're done, it feels like the best thing ever. And yeah. Anyways, hi everybody. Hi Raquel. Hi Dennis. Thanks for joining today. You probably noticed I put some in place a subscriber only for comments because we were getting so many wacky comments. So yeah, you guys have to subscribe now. So obviously you have. There we go. But now when you're training for something like cyclocross, so I'm thinking your gravel racing was your base for the year.
Yep.
And that's awesome. Although it's pretty high intensity, but that's okay to do a hard group ride or a race in part of your base building season. When you train for cyclocross, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I switched over really to more like Power Zone Max type workouts.
Mm-hmm.
VO2 primarily.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's go hard. Like essentially we're our races, and I've only done them here, so I have no experience, and it was my first year. But you essentially line up at a start line, and then they drop the start flag, and you go basically max heart rate for 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah, I've never seen heart rates like cyclocross. The only time I ever came close to 200 was in a cyclocross race.
Yeah. So that was kind of what I did, and as much as I could replicate that, and being again older and time crunched, you have to watch for me, it was all about watching recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned is, and I've heard you guys talk about and seen in the Facebook groups, some people trust watches and don't. I wear Garmin, and I've watched mine over time. And for me, HRV is a pretty good indicator. If it stays in a band, then I know I'm pretty much okay. If it starts to drift out low, then I'm like, okay, I need to take a break. So, and then there were times, and we can race here during that season as many as 3 times a week, and that got to be a little much.
And don't forget, racing is training. So if
Yep.
you're training 5 or 6 days a week, and were you running as well in your training or just riding?
No, at that point I was pretty well done and I was just doing the cyclocross racing. And that's
Okay.
about, and I did 3 races a week a couple times. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably, because sometimes it was Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, that's probably too much.
It's a lot.
So,
And when you race that often, it doesn't leave much time for other types of workouts because of all the recovery. I find,
yep.
You and I had chatted, and Eric and I first met because he reached out, he had some coaching questions, and we were chatting about how much base training do we need to do, how much intensity. And, the guideline that we often use is do a VO2 max workout once every 7 to 10 days. So if you were doing 3 in a week, that may be part of the challenge too, because your
Yep.
body we're working only the high end, and you can do that for a short period of time. But I would say maybe next season, dial it down a little. If you're racing in a week, if you're racing 3 times in a week, anything else you're going to do is going to be recovery or base probably.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, if I'm racing once in a week, I might do one other high intensity workout. I may not. And maybe what I'm doing is the day before my race, I'm doing some openers, which has some intensity in it, but not a huge fatigue load. So you're using the Peloton in your training, mostly power zone classes?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then any other
Primarily.
type of training, any ancillary stuff like strength or flexibility or mobility
Yep,
or any of
yep,
those?
all of the above. So, and I had a couple of other apps that I was using for strength, and I've primarily just let those go because the Peloton app pretty much has it all. So there's no sense paying for other things.
Yeah.
And I've found a couple instructors that I really like for mobility. For me, and I spent a lot of years. My job, I work in heavy industry, so heavy
Mhm.
manufacturing. And I spent a lot of years on shift, so walking in steel-toed boots on concrete. So my knees and hips are kind of beat up. So
Mhm.
I do a lot of hip mobility for that. And cycling isn't, a lot of cycling isn't ideal for somebody like me.
Yeah,
So hip mobility is a good thing. And there's
it's
some
good.
really good workouts in Peloton for that. So
Yeah. I remember when they
yeah.
first introduced, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I guess it was 2 years ago when they introduced mobility and they had like 3 classes and that was it. And
Mhm.
now there's a whole collection. I'm always telling people, look at mobility. If you need a little something to do and you want to do something on your day off, or you're not sure you want to do strength or flexibility or what, look at the mobility classes. They're really good. Um,
Yes.
yeah. The other classes that I'm getting a lot of really good feedback about, I told Matt this, was the ski strength program, right? So strength for skiers. And one of
Mhm.
the things I really like about it is it's got a lot of lateral movement and diagonal movement. And those are things we don't do on the bike. We need them. We need to work all those accessory muscles. And so even if you're not a skier, maybe take a look at those at some point.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
actually thought about doing that for just the reason that you described. So,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
interesting. I went back to the gym. I hired a strength coach in September. And what's sore? It's not my cycling muscles. I mean, they are too, because now we're starting to do really heavy weight. But when I started that first couple of weeks when I was sore all the time, it was like my pecs and all of this because we were stretching out and working the back and the adductors and the abductors. And I was just like, oh, all these little muscles that I don't use. Now I'm using them. It's great. Um, and then eventually the soreness starts to go away most of the time. But yeah, it's hard to balance. I will
Good.
say it's hard to balance strength and high volume training. I definitely struggle with some fatigue from time to time. But what else? Do you have any questions for me?
I do. So we talked a
Uh-oh.
little bit about I came out of fall in what I thought was pretty good shape.
Mhm.
And then I wanted to go into a base period. So I switched over and I was doing mostly VO2 because I felt like the limit on my FTP was my heart rate primarily
Yeah.
rather than my aerobic capacity per se. And when I looked at the research, I saw, or what I thought was aerobic decoupling. So can
Hmm.
you talk about how much, how wide do you really need to build a base, or how many hours a week would you need to do of zone
Yeah.
2 to really widen the base enough to make it
And it's
worthwhile?
hard when you look at athletes who don't have a lot of time. I think that's one of the biggest
Mhm.
considerations. So if I have an athlete who's training 16 to 20 hours a week, which is kind of unlimited, right? That's almost what we would see in the pro peloton.
Right.
They would have the ability to do a much higher percentage of their base and also some recovery rides, right? And recovery rides are to aid the next workout. They're to get me ready for the next workout. And then they could still do the intensity. Now, if you're doing, we'll just say 6 to 8 hours a week, then yeah, you probably don't have as much time to do base. But consider where you came from, which was you probably saw aerobic decoupling which is, by the way, aerobic decoupling is when my body basically says, I'm not efficient anymore. You're just moving your body at this point and you're not getting the anticipated response that you should get. And so we're less efficient in our training and in our performance. But you came from some high intensity work this fall. How many months did you race cross, or how many weeks did you race cross?
It was a couple months, so it wasn't
Yeah.
super long. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a relatively short season.
Right. If I had been coaching you, or if I were coaching myself in that kind of scenario, I think what I probably would have done is, instead of doing the high intensity, I would probably take maybe a week off completely, which is really hard for most of us. But usually at the end of a long training cycle, that gives us a little bit of a reset. And then probably would have done just exclusively zone 2 for, I don't know, maybe 4 weeks or so. And then I would have added in. And like I said, doing VO2, I had a client who was intent on raising his FTP, and he decided he was going to do 4 VO2 workouts a week. And I was like, okay, good, you're on your own. That's awesome. But the challenge with that is if you're only training the high end, you're not really supporting it with that base. And if you just came out of a lot of intensity, you don't have that base right then. So I would say build it up, then add the intensity back in. And that's a hard one, because you feel like, okay, the intensity is what's going to make me better, but you need to back off too. It's when we look at training, we look at these annual cycles. And for some people, those are really long cycles. Like an Olympian, you may have a 4-year cycle. And in year one, you're like, what the heck are we doing? This is not getting me where I need to go. But they have, a longer period of time. When we look at a year for a cycle, there's definitely times when we're going to be less fit, and that's okay. That's when we work on the other things. That's when we get in the gym and build the strength again. And you are lifting. Yeah. So that helps.
Yep.
Yeah. And then once we start doing the more intense stuff, it's a little harder to do the resistance training and the high intensity. It just causes a lot of fatigue in the muscles. So, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. So where are you now with your training? Are you doing the challenge?
I am. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And
So
I'm
we're
on the
basing you
5.
basically. But we gave you some intensity too.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm on the 5 ride a week plan. And typically, Saturdays and Sundays, I diverge from it and go longer. I'm trying to make myself, we were talking ahead of jumping on live, about riding outside in the Pacific Northwest. And if the weather's nice, I'm jumping outside for a couple hours on at least one day.
Good.
And, we can't, so where I live in Southwest Washington, you can't keep it zone 2. We're not flat enough.
Yeah.
But
Even
try
if you
and keep
take the
it.
gravel bike?
Even if you take the gravel bike, yeah. It's so, like, to me, the standard is to try and keep half of the vertical. So if you do a 30-mile ride, 1,500 feet of vertical, that's a flat ride for us.
That's here too.
Yeah. So
I've been doing a lot of riding along the beach. There's all these bluffs. And why the gravel bike, by the way? For those of you who don't have outdoor bikes, we tend to have a lot more climbing gear. And so it allows you to go slower in an easier gear and keep your power down, your heart rate down. Last year was the first year, I will say, and it was during the summer. And I had a very big volume year last year that I actually found I could climb in zone 2. And you have to go really slow. That's the thing. And that's a little frustrating too. So you have to choose roads where you're not chasing people around. But excuse me, that may also be an indicator of needing more base, right? So the more base I build up, the easier. When you read about some of these young pros and they're doing zone 2 work and their threshold, their zone 2 is like 340 watts. I'm like, really? That's great. Oh, to be young
Yeah.
and male and pro. But
Yeah, well, like that's like the Tade podcast, right? When he was talking about his sons.
I know.
I was
But they're
like, I
all
was like,
like that. It's
yeah,
crazy, right? And so, what does a higher FTP do for me when I'm racing? Well, it allows me to keep that pace without putting as much fatigue during the race itself. So,
yeah.
but yeah, they are superhuman people. That's my
Well, but
opinion.
it's helping all of us. I mean, if you like, if for folks, anybody that hasn't read Outlive by Peter Attia, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
raising your VO2 and working on strength is going to help all of us
Hmm.
live better, healthier, longer lives, right? That's why we're all doing this. We're talking
Yeah.
about racing and doing all these fun things and going outside, but really, it's about improving your standard of living. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the fun part, and having
Yeah.
fun while we're doing it.
But I will say sometimes the training we do is counter to what we should be, right? So is
Yeah,
training 20 hours a week smart?
true.
That's a really good question. Or are we creating, and we know that endurance athletes can have a higher incidence of heart conditions, but we also tend to be healthier in general. So,
Hmm.
yeah, but it is a strain on the body when we do a lot of the long stuff. Now, one other thing I should mention though, and I think it's interesting because a lot of people think, oh, if I want to increase my VO2 max, which is my ability to carry oxygen throughout my body, then I have to do a VO2 max workout. And that's not necessarily true. We improve our VO2 max in lots of ways, right? So it's not just that specific workout. But when we do a VO2 max workout, we're using that energy system. So, yeah. Well, it will be interesting to see as you start to add some intensity and do some testing where your FTP ends up and where your fitness ends up. So I would say for an outdoor cyclist, another really good, an indoor cyclist can do this too, but you need to benchmark it somewhere. So find a hill near you or find a flat road near you, something that you can use as a testing ground and see how you do, right?
Yeah.
I've got a 13-minute hill or a 15-minute hill or a 20-minute hill or whatever. That can be your test as well. And do you improve over time? So that would be another way to gauge that fitness change, I think.
Yeah, that's a good
Now,
idea.
yeah, because like I said, we get very caught up in that number, that FTP. Yeah. I'm FTPing today. That's something I hear in the Peloton world. I'm FTPing today. Okay. I guess that means you're taking your test. Um, anything else?
Well, I guess the follow up is how many hours a week do you think it takes to raise it? Like for me, I mean, is
How
8
many years have you
enough?
been training?
Well, this time coming back, I'm on year 2 or 3
Yeah.
at this point. I mean, I was out for 10 years, so we
Yeah.
were in Vancouver for about that long. So
Hmm.
I was off
So
the
we
bike for about
see
10 and back.
improvement for 3 to 5 years when we return
Okay.
to training. So can you improve? Yeah, probably. Will you improve forever? Probably not, because we don't,
Hmm.
right? Our FTP, and anybody who's been training for a while will know that our FTP kind of stays the same after we hit what I would call a mature athlete status, right? So and it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with training age. How many years have I been training consistently? And that break is a long break, but you still have a history there. So you're smarter.
Hmm.
You understand skills. You have, some advantage there. But can you continue to improve? Probably. But once we get to that level where we're kind of plateauing, then we're looking at marginal gains, right? What are the
Right.
little things that I can do? And oftentimes what we see is we can peak for something, but then we're going to go back down and level out. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I thought this was an important point. Oh, actually, it was Tim Cusick, who's kind of the power guru. And he was saying at the end of the day, as we age, what we're fighting is the aging process. If we don't decline, we're actually improving. Now,
Hmm.
aging for everybody is a little different number, right? Maybe that means I'm in my 50s, which we do see a lot of decline in our 50s, or my 60s or my 70s. But if I'm not getting slower, I'm improving, right? I'm fighting that aging process and the decline that comes with aging. So I like to believe that we can always improve. And I think that's one of the things that motivates me. But I like to look at all the different improvements. And sometimes it's just a Strava segment. I'm like, oh, good. You got a Strava segment today. You got a QOM. You're not dead yet, um,
Right.
which isn't very scientific, but, but it makes me feel good.
But
So,
it's something, right? Yeah.
Right. I got out there on my bike. So I know Raquel at 80, 83 or 84. Now I forget. Did I just give you an extra year? Um, is still improving, right? And that's okay. Improving in different
That's
ways.
awesome.
So, and I think the cool thing about training is we can be an experiment of one. We can,
Hmm.
keep good notes and see what we do and see how we improve. But I like to thank you, Raquel. I won't age you before your time. I should remember that. That's the year I graduated from high school, so 83. Um, and what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, keep notes of what you do, right? And see what the response is. And am I improving? If I do all VO2 max, what does that do for me? Probably makes me really tired.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's like putting the roof on. Dennis used this analogy one time, and I thought it was really good. It was like the roofers can't come in and put the roof on until you build the foundation. And I think that's true. As much as we think, okay, my quick fix is I'm just going to do this high intensity work and it's going to make me faster because it's high intensity. The reality is we need the base too. So if I'm doing 6 hours a week, would I do 4 hours of base? Maybe 3.5 hours of base, and then maybe 2 high intensity workouts. That might work. So yeah,
Yeah.
the answer
Eighty
is, as
twenty.
every coach says, it depends. Right. And 80/20, when we're training high volume, that's a lot of base, right? And
Mhm.
our body can't do more than 2 or 3 intense workouts a week. I find 2 is a pretty good number for me. And the other thing to remember is we don't just exclusively do zone 2 training one ride and um, VO2 max in one ride and threshold in one ride. Sometimes we can mix it up too. And I like those workouts, right? Where I'm doing some high intensity intervals and then I go into a tempo section because that builds fatigue resistance, which is part of the aerobic decoupling process, right?
Mhm.
And so doing the intensity late in a workout versus early in a workout, a lot of people will do their intensity and then just follow it with endurance. And instead, I can do a little intensity, do some tempo, do some endurance, come back and do some short, hard efforts at the end. So mixing it up can be effective too. So if you're not doing that, that may be something to think about.
Yeah. Well, and that keeps your interest level up too.
Yeah, it's boring to just go out and ride. Well, it's not boring, but the other thing about zone 2 training is, to really be effective and keep the aerobic system working throughout the ride. A lot of us think of it as, oh, this is my coffee ride, my time to go out with friends. The reality is, every time you stop for more than 3 to 5 minutes, you're kind of negating the duration of the training. So you're starting again, which is hard because it's like, I want to go out in the fall and have a coffee ride and have a piece of pie and that kind of thing and have fun. But we have to try to limit it. So when we're
Yeah.
training, we find we do a lot of things alone, unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
which is totally anti-Peloton, right? We're
Mhm.
together, we go far. Um, Anything else about training in specific?
I think that was my primary question.
Yeah, how much zone 2 do I do, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I would, like I said, I would experiment. What are your goals for the coming year? You're doing
Um,
a big
yeah,
mountain
so
bike
I,
race.
yeah, that's the A race. The A race is the High Cascades 100, which is in Central Oregon,
Yeah.
near Bend, and it's a 100-mile mountain bike race. So that's cross country, XC style.
Does that go up near Mackenzie Pass?
I don't know. The
100
route
miles.
changes. Yeah, the route changes a little bit every year, and it's a mix of single track, double track, kind of fire road stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Hi, Maggie. 100
made
miles
it.
on a mountain bike, for those of you who have no clue, takes a lot longer than 100 miles on a Peloton. And it
Oh
takes a
yeah,
lot longer than 100 miles on a road bike. I would say if you average 9, 10, 11 miles an hour, that's probably a pretty good pace on a 100-mile mountain
but
bike race.
yeah,
Yeah.
the expert folks are going to be in the 8 to 9 hour range, and I would say, mere mortals like myself are going to be somewhere 10 to 12, depending on what kind of day I have and what the actual course is, depending on
Yeah.
how much climbing there is and what kind of day you really have. If you have
Yeah.
a really good day and not much climbing and your fueling strategy works out good, I mean, I'm shooting for 10, but
Yeah.
If it's
The other
12,
challenge in mountain biking is just the technical, it beats you up physically. It's
yes.
not like
Yep.
sitting on a bike where it's nice and smooth and comfy. And yeah, it's the rest of your body that takes the load, and the suspension on your bike. But yeah,
Yep.
it's a lot of work when you're
Yep.
riding technical terrain. The same thing on gravel.
Yep.
Gravel, we call it underbiked, right? Because we are
Mhm.
riding technical stuff on bikes that aren't really designed with suspension and that kind of thing. So you definitely get beat up. But
Yep. And
yeah,
most of our gravel races around here, like the ones that I'm doing this year, most of ours aren't very technical at all.
yeah,
In terms of the gravel bike race and High Cascades, I think there's one little patch that's a little bit technical. In fact, most of the top people there every year, their debate is, do they ride a hardtail or a full suspension?
yeah.
So for weight.
It's what did I do in Oregon? I've done the 5-day Oregon Trail gravel grinder. The first
Oh
year they
yeah.
put that one on. That
Yep.
was great. They didn't have like hot water for the first 3 nights. You camp.
Oh
And I
no.
did their 3-day race too, which was that one had a little more technical in it. It had a time trial and then two a shorter stage and a longer stage, and those were a little more technical. Not super like single tracky technical, but definitely bumpy and rutty terrain and roots
Mhm.
and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
water crossings, not my favorite. I hate getting my feet wet when I'm riding
Oh
bikes. But
yeah. No.
yeah. Anyways, so let's do a quick rapid fire. You want to start?
Okay.
I'll start.
Sure. So mocha or latte?
Ooh. Espresso.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Ocean or mountains?
Ocean.
Okay. Spring or fall?
Oh, spring.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. And I think you might have answered this one, but I couldn't remember. So one by or two by?
1 by on
Hmm.
dirt, 2 by on road.
Okay. So there's a disclaimer on that one, huh?
There is.
Um,
Well, yeah, I won't explain. It's the bounciness, right? You end up losing gearing and 2 by, and it's simple. 1 by is simple.
yep, for sure. And then, so the really divisive question is Shimano or SRAM?
Campagnolo. No,
Oh,
SRAM.
okay. Okay.
That used to be the question for those of you who are like, what the heck are they talking about? Component groups. So there are manufacturers of component groups, and one is Shimano, which is a Japanese company, and their biggest industry is fly fishing. That's what your shifters are, fly fishing. SRAM, which is an American company that hit the ground 15 years ago or so, and
Yep.
then Campagnolo, which is the fine Italian component group, which I rode forever until I went to SRAM. So I just bypassed Shimano altogether. Let's see. How about for you? Favorite Peloton instructor?
Oh boy. It's a toss-up between Matt and Christian.
Nice. I would agree with that. Headwind or climb a hill?
Climb a hill.
Okay. Me too. Favorite ride food?
My favorite ride food. God, peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
That's good. I don't have to think that hard about food. Favorite post-ride food?
Favorite post-ride food? A milkshake.
Oh, that sounds really good. I can't do milkshakes anymore because they have like 2,000 calories, but I can have you know what I do? I take my protein and almond milk and I use my frother.
Oh yeah. There you
And then
go.
it gets creamy. Yeah. Athletic idol.
Boy, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one for a while. I don't know.
I know it's hard. There's so many important people, I think, in the sport world. I'm still a fan of Alona Mar. She's one of my favorites right now. She's done a
Yeah.
lot for women in sport.
I don't know that I have one necessarily.
And that's
Isn't
okay.
that horrible? Yeah.
That's all right. I think Raquel Hicks is one of mine. I will say that. Because she's awesome at 83. Still improving, still learning,
Right?
still doing the
I know.
things.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. We should all be so lucky.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to talk about one thing real quick. which is, first of all, I want to say congratulations for everybody who did Pelafondo. So Maggie, you came at the right time. Pelafondo was awesome, and Maggie kept everybody going all week. And Jim, along with Maggie, Jim had put together the class stack, so that was awesome. Apparently, we had 44 athletes that recorded and finished their rides they broke the goal, 2,855 miles. So that's pretty big. Smashed the goal this time. So we'll see next time what we do. But that was awesome. Congratulations to everyone who did Pelafondo as part of Team Wilpers or as part of other teams. The other question I wanted to address is, how do we return to training? I'm getting this question a lot, which is, gee, I'm going to be on vacation for a week, or I have a really big work week coming up, or I've been sick, or I got injured, and now I have to come back. How do I do that? How do you approach a return to training, Eric? What do you think?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on how long I've been out of training.
Yeah.
Something like a week, if I've been pretty consistent, normally just pick it back up.
I
Unless,
know that first ride is going to be really hard.
yeah. Unless you've been sick or something like that, then maybe you ease back into it. But, and I think, the longer you've been out, then maybe the longer it takes to come back and then ease back into it. So
I agree. That was the first note I wrote, was how long were you off? And that's the most important question. So if I miss a ride or 2 rides, just jump back in. You don't need to make them up. You don't have to stack a million classes. That doesn't make sense from a fitness point of view. Just jump back in on the schedule. If you're out for longer, and again, as Eric said, it depends. Was I injured or ill, or was it just a break? I may jump back into the schedule. I may ease back in. I have a workout that I like to do, which is called Return to Training. Imagine that. And it is a shorter workout. It's mostly endurance, but it's got a couple it's almost like a pre-race ride, or the ride we would do the day before an FTP test, right? So we're doing a little bit of openers just to kind of blow out the cobwebs. And if I've been gone for longer than a week, then I'm going to ease back in slowly. You can't just jump back in where you were. So maybe go back to the beginning of a training block, or maybe even modify from there. And I usually tell people when they're returning, ride, be conservative, and then see how you feel. How do you feel that day, during the training, after the training, the next day? And that's going to help you make that decision about how to jump back in. So, and I'm always happy to advise people if you have questions. But yeah, it's hard to return to training. We know it's going to feel hard. And I tend to be a lot more conservative, especially with injury too. People are like, well, I have to test out and see if I can put weight on my leg. And it's like, okay, we do, but listen to your doctor, listen to your physical therapist, and then listen to your body. So see how you feel. But that's a hard one. So am I recovering or am I returning? Yeah, good answer. See, anybody can be a coach. We know the answers. What do we have coming up this week? You guys have gotten an easy week this week, and now we're going to jump back in, and we're really going to build here. So Monday, rest day. Take your rest days. Take your rest days. Can I say it again? Take your rest day. Go ahead and say it, Eric. Take your rest day.
I'm not the one to listen to on that one.
I know. It's hard.
I have a hard time.
I take a rest day. Sometimes I take 2. Yeah. So it's interesting. We've been experimenting with some different models of how do we coach the older athlete, right? 50 up plus, or maybe even 40 plus. And one of the things that we're looking at right now is, what's the impact of taking 2 days in a row off, which actually I think is a really nice reset. And also continuing to do some high intensity during our base phase as well, right? So I might do some VO2 blocks when I wouldn't normally do that, but not 3 days a week, right? Maybe 1 day a week. And instead of one of the long rides, I might do an intense ride instead. So rest days are important. Tuesday, we jump in with Olivia, Power Zone. It'll be awesome. Just imagine Olivia, 45 minutes of Power Zone. And then Wednesday, we're with Hannah Frankson. And Raquel's going to do 4,800 rides. Congratulations, wow. Raquel. I know. I think I had 500. It's been a while. I haven't ridden the Peloton in a while. Anyways, Wednesday, Hannah Frankson, 45 minutes. Endurance, which is awesome. Take it easy, especially if you feel some fatigue from Olivia. take it in zone 2 if you need to. It's always okay to go zone 2. Thursday, we're with Ben, 45-minute Power Zone Max. So Max was easier than you guys thought. The last time we did a Max, everybody was like, oh my God, I can't do a Power Zone Max. Yes, you can. Short, hard efforts, but you get lots of easy too. So you'll find typically our TSS is going to be a little lower in a Max ride than it will be in a Power Zone ride. Friday is a day off. Again, rest. Do something restorative if you want, but rest is best. And then Saturday, 60 minutes with Dennis, Power Zone Endurance. You can sub up a shorter ride if you need or a longer ride if you want. Or get outside, which is always my goal. Sundays are my outdoor days right now, and I love it. And then Sunday with Sam, so a 30-minute Power Zone Endurance ride. It should be February 1st, Matt live. Yes, is Matt going to come back from skiing in Japan? Oh my God, what epic adventures he's having, right?
That looks awesome.
I know. It looks cold. Did you see the reel he posted, everybody, of the solo lift? So it was like a J-bar, whatever, not a chair going up the hill, but an individual little lift. And he was like, I'm terrified. I'm really scared of this. But yeah, I can't believe Matt's scared of anything. But yeah. Anyways, that's our week. And make sure you're on the chats. If you didn't see the news from Domestiq, they are extending another month of free memberships for all the premium stuff. I think they're still in the process of merging the two sites. And so through the 28th, there will still be all the premium features are still going to be included in a free membership. So that's awesome. And then that's about it. Yeah. Post your success and your failures. We learn from failures. Any final words, Eric?
No, I think that did it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So it was awesome. I love hearing people's stories. You all inspire me very much. So have a good week, everybody. And we'll see you on the leaderboard.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.